Imagine creatures that have been around since the time of the dinosaurs and even before, and are still alive today. The velvet worm, a bizarre little predator that traps prey with sticky goo. The lungfish, a fish that can breathe air and survive in drought by burrowing into mud. And the nautilus, a living fossil that's been around for over 500 million years. These are ancient creatures still alive today. Some of the most incredible creatures on Earth have been around for millions of years. The eerie monkfish, with its fishing pole lure, to a creature living in freezing waters with a 1,000-year lifespan. And the gharial, with its unique snout designed for catching fish. These are ancient creatures still alive today. Well, this is a strange-looking creature. It's called the velvet worm. These odd but cute little creatures have been around for over 500 million years. Their appearance hasn't changed much. If you've ever seen one, you might think it's a cross between a worm and an insect, but it's neither. It's in its own branch on the tree of life. And I think I get what makes them sorta cute. It's their soft, velvety bodies. They almost look like little fairy tale creatures. Velvet worms are typically about 2 to 10 centimeters long and have segmented bodies with tiny legs that allow them to move slowly across the forest floor. They don't look like it, but they also hunt in a very interesting way. They don't chase down their prey. Instead, they shoot out this sticky adhesive substance from glands near their heads to trap smaller animals. Then they walk over to their prey and eat it alive, using their sharp mandibles to chew through the body. The adhesive can be so strong that the worm can capture animals several times its size. The reason they've survived this long, seemingly unchanged, is partly thanks to their incredibly efficient hunting style. They've found a niche that works perfectly well for them, so there's no need to change. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Lungfish are some of the oldest creatures to have ever lived on Earth, dating back more than 400 million years. These fish are often considered the closest living relatives to the first creatures that made the transition from water to land. They've evolved a set of highly specialized traits that allow them to survive in environments where other fish just wouldn't. Lungfish can breathe air. A fish that can breathe air. How wild is that? While most fish use gills to extract oxygen from water, lungfish have both gills and lungs, so they can survive in low oxygen environments like stagnant ponds or dried up riverbeds. And when there's a drought, some species of lungfish can even bury themselves in mud and enter this almost hibernation state, breathing air through their lungs until water returns. Gee, I wonder why these things have survived for hundreds of millions of years. While other fish species may have been wiped out during mass extinctions, lungfish have adapted to survive, making them one of the longest living groups of fish, so cheers to them. The nautilus is one of the most iconic creatures from the deep. When you look at paintings of ancient sea life amongst all the scary extinct monsters, you'll usually see these things as well, but they're still around. The nautilus has been swimming the oceans for over 500 million years. If you've ever seen one, you'll immediately recognize the spiral shell-like structure that it's famous for. The nautilus belongs to an ancient group of cephalopods, which also includes modern squids, octopuses, and cuttlefish. But unlike its more evolved relatives, the nautilus hasn't changed much. It's sometimes called a living fossil, as it's considered one of the oldest species still around today. These things have survived through massive extinction events, and one of the reasons it's managed to stick around for so long is that it's very adaptable in its diet. Nautiluses are opportunistic feeders, scavenging on dead fish, and crustaceans, and smaller marine life. They're also known to hunt smaller fish using their tentacles, but that shell is just beautiful, and a big part of that is because it follows the Fibonacci sequence, a pattern that appears a lot, from the branching of trees to the arrangement of petals and flowers. Sturgeons are massive fish that have been around for more than 200 million years. They were here long before the dinosaurs and have survived through major shifts in the Earth's climate and environment. They're hard to miss. They can grow over 12 feet long and weigh up to 1,500 pounds. They're one of the largest species of fish alive today. Sturgeon are also known as living fossils. They have armored bodies covered in bony plates, and their long, pointy snouts are perfect for sifting through mud and sand in search of food. Unlike many other fish, sturgeons don't have teeth. Instead, they have a specialized structure known as barbels on their snouts, which they use to sense their prey. Sturgeons are bottom feeders, relying on their sense of touch and smell to find things like worms and small fish, again, in the mud down there. They also spend a significant part of their lives in fresh water, but then move to salt water to breed, which makes their life cycle very unique. The tuatara is also called a living fossil, and for good reason. Native only to New Zealand, this reptile is the last surviving member of an ancient order called Rhynchocephalia, a group that lived over 200 million years ago. Despite resembling a lizard, tuataras are not actually lizards, but they belong to the same reptile family. Their closest relatives went extinct a long time ago, and what makes the tuatara even more fascinating is its unique physiology. For example, they have a third eye on the top of their head. It's not very noticeable, but it is there, and it's known as a parietal eye, which is sensitive to light and helps regulate their circadian rhythm. It doesn't work like their other eyes, but it is pretty cool that it's there, and it connects them to more ancient reptiles when their ancestors had more complex ways of sensing things. Another fun fact, the tuatara is incredibly slow growing, and they can live for over 100 years. Monkfish, also known as anglerfish, are a bizarre and ancient species that have been lurking in the deep oceans for over 100 million years. They have a very unique and eerie appearance with their flat, wide bodies, their enormous mouths, the sharp teeth, the bumpiness. Monkfish just look like something from another time. They live in deep water where there's not much light, so they've developed an interesting survival tactic. They have a lure on their heads, a fleshy filament that they use to attract prey. The lure is similar to a fishing pole, and the monkfish dangles it in front of its mouth to attract smaller fish. When a potential meal gets too close, the monkfish strikes, using its large mouth to engulf the prey whole. These fish are excellent predators, capable of swallowing fish much larger than themselves. They're also super adaptable. They can live in all kinds of depths and at different parts of the ocean, so this mix of flexibility and clever hunting has helped them stick around as long as they have. Antarctic sponges are another incredible example of creatures that have survived for a very long time in some of the harshest environments on Earth. These sponges can live for hundreds, even thousands of years, making them some of the oldest living creatures in the animal kingdom. So why do they live so long? Well, it's a result of the frigid environment, which slows their metabolism. In fact, some Antarctic sponges have been found to grow less than 1 millimeter per year, meaning they can take thousands of years to reach their full size. They're found in the icy waters of Antarctica, surviving in a region where very few other species can handle the freezing temperatures and the constant darkness. Something else very strange about these things is they don't rely on sunlight for energy. Instead, they feed on microscopic plankton and bacteria that drift through the water. Antarctic sponges are also super important for the health of the ecosystem. They provide habitats for other organisms, and they play an important role in recycling nutrients. The gharial is a large crocodile-like reptile native to the rivers of the Indian subcontinent. They're the crocodiles that you've seen in nature documentaries, and you're like, oh wait, what the hell is that thing? Doesn't look like a normal crocodile. With that long, thin snout, it's definitely one of the most unique members of the crocodile family. Gharials have been around for over 200 million years, surviving through climate changes and massive shifts in the Earth's ecosystems. They're specialized fish eaters. Their weird snouts are just perfectly suited for catching fish. They use their sharp teeth to grab slippery fish with incredible speed. Unlike other crocodiles, gharials don't need to chase down their prey on land. They just lurk underwater, waiting for the right moment to strike. Their snouts make them highly adaptable for life in rivers, where they often swim with their bodies submerged while keeping only their eyes and nostrils above water. Unfortunately, despite how ancient these things are, the gharial is now critically endangered, with only a few hundred of them left. Horseshoe crabs are another ancient creature that's been around for over 450 million years. Now, horseshoe crabs aren't true crabs. They're actually more closely related to spiders and scorpions, which is odd. These things have a hard horseshoe-shaped exoskeleton, and long tails that they use to steer and maintain balance in the ocean. They live in shallow coastal waters, where they feed on small creatures like worms and algae. What's truly nuts about horseshoe crabs, though, is their unique bodily fluids. It contains a substance called hemolymph, which is used in a special test for bacterial contamination in medical devices and vaccines. This test is critical for making sure pharmaceutical products are safe, so horseshoe crabs have still found a way to be helpful after hundreds of millions of years. And their BLOOD, it's also blue, so that's pretty cool. As you can imagine though, because it's so useful in modern medicine, it's also quite sought after. And over-harvesting has put horseshoe crab populations at risk, making them another ancient species that may not be around forever. The coelacanth is perhaps the most famous living fossil of them all. These deep-sea fish were thought to have gone extinct with the dinosaurs around 65 million years ago, but in 1938, a fisherman off the coast of South Africa pulled up a specimen, shocking the scientific world. These things are the definition of living fossils. They've barely changed since they first appeared over 400 million years ago. These guys have very unusual fins. Unlike most fish, coelacanths have paired lobed fins, which are believed to be the ancestors of the limbs that would eventually evolve in land animals. These fins are highly flexible, and when the coelacanth swims, it moves its fins in this graceful, alternating motion, almost like it's walking on the seafloor. This adaptation has led scientists to believe that coelacanths could hold the key to understanding how some of the earliest creatures on Earth made that transition from water to living on land. Coelacanths are incredibly rare, living at depths of 200 to 2,000 feet in the Indian Ocean. First up, we've got the coelacanth. This fish is seriously cool, but also a little creepy looking. What makes it so interesting is that it was thought to have been long extinct, gone for 65 million years alongside the dinosaurs, but then in 1938, fishermen off the coast of South Africa pulled one up, and boom, you had a live and kicking living dinosaur. These fish have been around for 360 million years, and honestly, you can kind of tell. They're huge, sometimes growing over 6 feet long. They have thick lobed fins that make them look, I don't know, it's just something really ancient looking about them. And here's something really cool. They seem to be a kind of link between sea creatures and land animals. The way their fins move is a bit like legs of amphibians, which hints that they could be a distant relative to the first creatures that crawled onto land. Coelacanths are still found today, mostly off the coast of Madagascar and around Indonesia, but there's no denying that they are one of the creepiest and coolest survivors from the past. The lamprey. These creatures are definitely one of the most terrifying things still swimming around today. There are lots of different types, but the one most people know about is the parasitic lamprey, which looks like a giant horrifying leech, and that's basically exactly what it is. They've been around for hundreds of millions of years, and they're as creepy as they sound. The lamprey is a parasitic species. It latches onto its victim with its circular, sucker-like mouth, which is lined with rows and rows of sharp teeth, and once attached, it starts rasping away at its prey, eating its flesh to access all the red stuff inside, leaving these huge, ugly scars on their victims. Lampreys are some of the most primitive fish alive today. In fact, a lamprey fossil dating back 360 million years was found in 2006, making it a living fossil that scientists have used to study ancient evolution. The sea lamprey has earned a reputation as a pest in places like the Great Lakes in North America, where it kills many of the fish that it attaches itself to. Next on the list we have the pygmy right whale. This is one of the rarest whales you can find on Earth today, and they've been around for about 23 million years. They've only been spotted alive and at sea a handful of times, and because there aren't a large number of specimens and DNA for the animal to pull from, there's still a lot that science doesn't know about them. Exactly what they eat and how they behave is still a bit murky. They're very small, for whales anyway, only measuring about 21 feet in length. Yeah, only, but for a whale that is pretty pretty small. They live in the cool waters of the southern hemisphere. They're said to have formed from baleen whales millions of years ago, and as rare as they are now, things may get even worse. As oceans continue growing warmer, the population of these whales is going to drop even further. The nautilus. The nautilus is a mollusk that's lived in the sea for 500 million years, thriving during a time when the continents were still taking shape. Originally, there were 10,000 different species of this animal, but today only a few survive in the western Pacific Ocean and the coast of the Indian Ocean. Chambered nautilus, a specific type of the creature, use their 90 retractable suckerless tentacles equipped with are called chemonosensors to hunt for fish, crabs, and lobsters. The tentacles help them pick up food scents in their environment. Using a beak-like mouth, they pry open tough shells to access their prey. They also regulate the amount of water and air in their shell through an internal tube called a hyponome. These are such strange but really beautiful looking creatures. The striped markings on them, just very eye-catching. Hagfish. These are one of the most bizarre and ancient creatures still alive today. They've been around for over 300 million years, and just to put this into perspective, this means they were swimming around before dinosaurs came about. These things are often called slime eels. As for why, I'll get to that in a moment. Now, they aren't actually eels, and some scientists even question whether they should be classified as fish. One of the most fascinating things about the hagfish is its unique anatomy. They do have a skull, but they completely lack a spine. They also have 2 brains. And I don't think I've ever heard of a creature with 2 brains before. That's crazy. Hagfish spend their nights scavenging for food, feeding mostly on the carcasses of larger animals that sink to the ocean floor. They have a strong sense of smell, allowing them to locate food sources. In 2011, researchers made a pretty interesting discovery. Hagfish can actually absorb nutrients through their skin and gills. This makes them one of the only vertebrates known to have this ability. It's especially useful when food is scarce. It just increases the surface area available to absorb nutrients. But as promised, of course, we gotta get to the reason behind the slime eel nickname. Well, these things have the ability to produce this thick, sticky slime that can clog the gills of other fish, making it nearly impossible for them to be eaten. This defense mechanism is so effective that hagfish have virtually no natural enemies, making them one of the ocean's most resilient animals. The lancetfish has a very prehistoric look. They got these sharp teeth and that big sail dorsal fin on the top, and this is its scientific name, Alopesaurus ferox. If I didn't know any better, I would think that was a dinosaur. These fish can get pretty big too. Some can grow up to 2 meters or about 6'6". They can be found in nearly all oceans except for the polar regions. They're aggressive hunters, feeding on smaller fish and squid, but they've also been known to eat members of their own species when no other options are around. I'd never heard about these guys until today, but I'm really glad that I've discovered them. They may be on my list of top 10 favorite fish now. I love the way they move through the water too. The sturgeon is another ancient creature that's been around since the early Jurassic period. Now, these fish are mainly known for being the source of caviar. They're unfortunately endangered today thanks to overfishing. Now, I didn't know how big these guys can get though. Some species of sturgeon can grow over 20 feet long, making them as large as a great white. Sturgeon feed on small animals from the ocean floor, and they're generally pretty harmless to humans, but just because of how massive they are, they can pose a threat. Unintended, but still, there have been cases where sturgeons have leapt out of the water and landed on boats, causing injury or, in rare cases, even death. The sawfish. Now, this is a pretty remarkable survivor from the Cretaceous period, and they are unfortunately also critically endangered today. We can find them in both saltwater and freshwater. It's even been spotted up to 100 kilometers inland in rivers and creeks. They can get pretty huge, growing up to 7 meters or 23 feet long. They do look like strange sharks, but they're actually more closely related to rays. You can kind of tell by their belly part. They look a bit like a stingray. Also, they have a really funny mouth. Anyway, their most distinctive feature is what can only be described as a chainsaw on their snout, which is not only a weapon, but also a highly sensitive organ, covered in what are called electrosensitive pores. The sawfish can detect prey even with poor eyesight. These things are generally pretty peaceful, despite having, a chainsaw on their face, but they they can get dangerous if they're provoked. Fascinating fossil discovery also revealed that prehistoric sawfish were likely food sources for the massive carnivorous dinosaur Spinosaurus. They found vertebrae from a sawfish lodged in one of their teeth. The alligator gar. It's not actually an alligator, but a massive fish from the gar family, and it's one of the largest freshwater fish in North America. Found mostly in the southern United States, they're ancient creatures that have been around for about 100 million years. They can grow up to 10 feet long and weigh over 400 pounds. With their thick armored scales and their large fang-filled mouths, they do look more like a crocodile than a fish, or an alligator than a fish. There are plenty of photos of fishermen holding up these things, and sometimes it takes two fully grown men to hold one. In one incident, a man dangling his feet off a dock had an alligator gar latch onto his foot and try to pull him under the water. Now, fortunately, he did manage to escape, but there's a very good chance that these fish might have done this before, and that's the reason behind several mysterious drownings. And finally, we have tadpole shrimp. Picture a prehistoric sea-dwelling creature, and something like this is probably exactly what's going to come to mind. Tadpole shrimp are ancient crustaceans that have existed for an incredibly long time, dating back to the Triassic period, around 220 million years ago. They belong to the Notostraca group and have kept a remarkably unchanged appearance throughout their history. They're kind of crazy looking. They have this really cool shield-looking carapace that covers their bodies. And despite their ancient origins, they've continued to thrive in the modern world. They're adept at surviving in environments with fluctuating water levels, often appearing in habitats prone to temporary drying. They have a unique survival strategy during rough conditions too. In response to drought or other not so favorable environment factors, they enter a state of dormancy, forming cysts that protect them until conditions become suitable again. This is a large part of what's helped them endure for as long as they have. This video supposedly shows a woolly mammoth crossing a river in Siberia. It quickly went viral, racking up 3 million views on YouTube and more. People couldn't help but wonder if the mammoth had been living for centuries in remote parts of Siberia, completely untouched by humans. Now, whether you think this video is a hoax or not, there have been some interesting reports of supposed living mammoths. They're believed to have gone extinct over 10,000 years ago, but there are still stories floating around about them being spotted in some of the world's most remote places, especially in the northern hemisphere's tundra. Native American tribes have been telling tales about these creatures for years. The Northeast Algonquins talked about a great moose with a weird extra limb growing between its shoulders that it used to prepare its bed. The Naskapi people from northeastern Labrador spoke of a monster with a long nose that it would use to hit people. Even Siberian tribesmen have reported seeing large, shaggy beasts roaming around, though no one's actually caught solid proof. There have been mammoth sightings across Asia, South America, North America, and Russia. What you're looking at here is a massive sized sturgeon. The footage originally posted by Ronald Drago was shared and reposted all over the internet, and it's easy to see why. The creature is just a monster. The sturgeon is an ancient creature that's been around since the early Jurassic period. Some of these fish can grow over 20 feet long, which is as big as a great white shark. They mostly feed on small animals from the ocean floor and are harmless to humans, but because of their size, they can still pose a threat. There have been reports of sturgeons leaping out of the water, landing on boats, and causing serious injuries or even death. They can weigh over 1,000 pounds. This footage here was posted to YouTube by Adam Pitts, who'd hauled in this Jurassic era sized beast in Florida. A bunch of hunters had been trying to snag this thing because it was responsible for some deaths. No surprise there. This gator was not missing out on any meals. Pitts and his team had a long battle with the gator before finally hauling it out of the lake. It was about 12'8". It's sad, but unfortunately some animal populations just need to be controlled sometimes, especially when it comes to people's safety. This wasn't just a hunt for the thrill of it, it was for the protection of the community. This is not an AI video. This is a real piece of footage taken back in 2018 at a golf course in South Carolina. This gator was caught strolling through the golf course on its way to somewhere. It's become a pretty famous video. The event was taken by multiple people from different angles. Video of it showed up on the news, and it's understandable. It looks like footage of a living dinosaur. Even the family of deer in the background just couldn't help stand there and total shock. Like, what are we looking at right now? They're standing there like a deer in headlights. Alright, I guess deer aren't really all that hard to surprise. But still, gators are some of the oldest animals on the planet. I still find it so cool that you really are looking at a living dinosaur when you see one. This footage here was captured by members of a Japanese expedition crew in the Congo. They were seeking out evidence of an elusive animal known to the locals as Mokele Membe, a plesiosaur-like creature believed by some cryptozoologists to be a remnant of the Cretaceous period. Mokele Membe comes from Bantu mythology. It's said to live in the Congo River Basin. It's described in different ways. Some say it's a reptilian creature, others think of it as a spirit, but the most popular description is an ancient dinosaur-like sauropod. In the early 1900s, cryptozoologists got really interested in this legend, with some launching expeditions to find proof of the creature's existence. Most experts believe that the stories about Mokele Membe are probably based on sightings of the black rhinoceros, which used to roam the region. Some even think the myth may have been influenced from earlier tales about Great Zimbabwe. This next creature is called Tuatara. Just look at this silly, stubby-legged little lizard. Cute as can be, according to me. I know some people are freaked out by reptiles and lizards, but I really enjoy them. So these things can be found roaming around in New Zealand. They look like a lot of reptiles you've probably seen, very similar to iguanas, but these things have quite the history. They've been around for an estimated 225 million years. So once again, they're basically living dinosaurs, just very small ones. Pretty cool. What's also interesting about these things is that they don't have ear holes like modern day reptiles, so their hearing is, of course, limited, but they can still respond to low frequencies. Next up, we have the Chinese giant salamander, and when I say giant, I do mean giant. These are the largest amphibians in the world. Some of them can reach up to 6 feet in length, weighing in at about 110 pounds. That sounds like a salamander that would have been roaming the earth during the time of the dinosaurs, and they did. The Chinese giant salamander has been around since the Jurassic period, about 170 million years ago. These creatures are also known for their very unique and haunting sounds. They've been described as rather unsettling. Some people describe them as barks or hissing, but the creepiest noise is the high-pitched crying, almost like a very young human. Given how huge these things are and the fact that they clearly do not look human, that would be pretty freaky hearing a sound like that come out of an animal like this. But honestly, I still think these creatures are kind of cute in their own weird way. And we have another dinosaur, the Komodo dragon. These things are insane. They're huge, some of the biggest lizards on the planet, weighing more than a full-grown human in some cases, and these things are as dangerous as they look. They've been known to attack and even kill humans, and to top it off, their bite is venomous. Scientists have found Komodo dragon fossils that are about 4 million years old. These giant lizards are found in Indonesia today, specifically 5 islands, one of which is called Komodo Island, which, no surprise, has the largest population of Komodo dragons in the country. You can't just wander onto this island, not that you'd ever want to. It's very strictly a guided tour situation. If you ever visit, trust me, don't want to go alone. If you stray too far, it could be the last mistake you make. Komodo dragons are no joke. Along with crocodiles and alligators, they're one of the closest things we've got to real-life dinosaurs. These reptiles can reach lengths of 10 feet with razor-sharp teeth and venomous saliva. They eat whatever they can catch: monkeys, deer, boars, goats, and sometimes humans. They're just pure predators. Now, they don't attack humans all the time, but between 1974 and 2012, there were 24 reported attacks in Komodo National Park. The shoebill stork. These birds have been around for 30 million years at the least. If you were to look at every living bird today and you had to just pick one that looked like it had been around since the prehistoric times, it would have to be the shoebill stork, right? This is definitely the one I'd be picking. Look at the size of the beak on these things, very dinosaur-esque. Shoebills are found in the swamps and wetlands of Africa. They're massive birds, standing about 4 to 5 feet tall with a wingspan of 7 to 8 feet. They have this unmistakable shoe-shaped bill, which can reach lengths of up to 9.5 inches just on its own. This massive bill is a formidable weapon for catching prey, which is mostly fish. They're known to be very patient hunters, standing motionless for hours before striking at lightning speed. And these birds really are just as intimidating as they look. Highly skilled hunters that are capable of preying on animals as large as young crocodiles. And to top it off, they make this eerie clicking sound with their beak. They sound almost like an automatic firearm or the predator. What you are looking at here is a horseshoe crab. Now, crabs may not be all that exciting to you, but these ones are different. Horseshoe crabs are one of the oldest creatures on the planet. They've been a staple of the Earth for around 445 million years. That is a lot of years. That's back before the land split off to form the continents that we have now. Earth still consisted of one single supercontinent when these things were around. These ancient arthropods have seen old friends go and new ones come along, and when I say friends, I mean entire species evolve and then go extinct. They've seen a lot. And interestingly, even though they have crab in their name, they're not actually crabs. They're more closely related to arachnids. In March of 2011, Sean Funk, a shovel operator at a mine in Fort McMurray, Alberta, was digging when he made an amazing discovery. A discovery that turned out to be Alberta's oldest dinosaur fossil and one of the best preserved ever found in the entire world. Honestly, this has to be the most amazing dinosaur discovery that I've ever read about. And I think Don Henderson, curator of dinosaurs at the Royal Tyrrell Museum, agrees, saying at the time, "Right away we knew it was going to be something good, but we had no idea how good it was going to be." So after getting the fossil back to the museum, Don and his team got to work, and 6 years later the dinosaur was named Borealopelta markmichelli. The name Borealopelta means shield of the north, and the species name honors Mark Mitchell, the museum technician who spent over 7,000 grueling hours removing the dinosaur from rock. Now, I'm not done with this one. There's just too much to talk about with this discovery to cram it into one point. So as I said, the Borealopelta was incredibly well preserved. It was covered in thick armor, especially around its neck. It also had these massive 20-inch spikes at the shoulders that were assumed to be for fighting, but Victoria Arbour, a curator of paleontology, also thought they might have been a display of health and strength, similar to the horns of a bull or tusks of an elephant. Now here's what's utterly crazy to me though. This dinosaur was so intact, they were able to see what was in its stomach. There were twigs and ferns in there, suggesting it ate during the wet season. Scientists think it could have been swept away by a flash flood, eventually sinking to the bottom of the sea. The body would have flipped over and sank with its thick back and bloated belly, causing it to be preserved in sediment, creating a natural time capsule that kept it safe for 110 million years. Here's another crazy thing about this find though. They were even able to determine, to a certain degree, what color the creature was. Most of the fossil was covered in relatively well-preserved skin, and from this, they were able to study pigment cells called melanosomes. Melanosomes are seen in nature all the time. It's what gives many modern-day animals unique markings like spots and stripes. It's rare to see melanosomes in fossils, but again, Borealopelta was especially well preserved. At least one component of Borealopelta's color was this reddish brown, said Caleb Brown from the Royal Tyrrell Museum. The color on its back may have been part of a camouflage pattern called countershading, helping it blend into its environment and avoid predators. Now also in 2011, a team of paleontologists led by William Hammer discovered a new species of ancient dinosaur in the frozen mountains of Antarctica, an area that's usually thought of as one of the coldest places on Earth, but of course millions of years ago it was much warmer. The dinosaur was small, around 4 to 5 feet long, and had bird-like hip bones. It was likely related to early plant eaters like the Ferbosaur and Heterodontosaur, which were the ancestors of larger and more famous dinos like Stegosaurus and Ankylosaurus. The fossils were found on Mount Kirkpatrick, part of the central transatlantic mountains. Hammer and his team uncovered a leg and foot, but they weren't sure if they had found the dinosaur's head. It would take about a year to fully understand what they'd found. Thomas Holtz, a geology professor at the University of Maryland, noted that the find could help fill gaps in both dinosaur evolution and the ancient Antarctic environment, saying that this discovery was from a time when dinosaurs were just starting to take over, comparing these early small plant eaters to rabbits, fast, common, and without armor, but important to the overall evolution of the giant plant eaters that came later. Finding fossils in Antarctica is extremely challenging because of the harsh conditions and short research window. Hammer had been trying to return to the site since 1990, but bad weather and helicopter problems cut short his 2003 trip. As Holtz put it, anytime we find fossils there, it's a brand new species, it's practically unexplored territory. So these weren't the only dino remains William Hammer discovered in the mountains of Antarctica. In 1990, he and his team discovered a 22-foot meat-eating dinosaur called Cryolophosaurus. This was a big deal because it was the first dinosaur ever found in Antarctica. Cryolophosaurus was a meat-eating dinosaur that lived around 190 million years ago during the early Jurassic period. It was about 20 to 23 feet long, 6 to 7 meters, and weighed roughly 1,000 pounds. What really sets this dinosaur apart was its unique crest. The crest, found on the top of its head, had a very unusual shape, kind of like a frozen backwards mohawk. There are like two kind of things here. It's believed that the crest could have been used for display, either to attract mates or to communicate with other members of its species. As Hammer put it, it looked like a frozen crested reptile, which is how they got the name Cryolophosaurus, meaning frozen crested lizard. And again, in the early 1990s, William Hammer of Augustana College discovered more incredible fossils on Mount Kirkpatrick. These particular fossils included parts of a foot, leg, and ankle bones from a long-necked dinosaur that lived around 190 million years ago. It wasn't until much later, though, that the fossil was identified. The fossils were painstakingly removed from the ice and rock using jackhammers, rock saws, and chisels under extremely difficult conditions, said Nathan Smith, a graduate student at the Field Museum in Chicago. After a lot of hard work, Smith and paleontologist Diego Pohl realized they'd found a new species of dinosaur, which they named Glacialosaurus hammeri. This dinosaur was about 20 to 25 feet long and would have weighed between 4 to 6 tons. It belonged to a group called sauropodomorphs, which includes some of the largest dinosaurs ever. Think of those massive-sized, long-necked plant eaters. Around 20,000 years ago, a young woolly rhinoceros was going about its day in what's now northern Siberia. It was probably foraging for food when it made an oopsie and drowned in a river. Fast forward to 2020, and that same woolly rhino became a huge discovery for scientists. As rising temperatures cause permafrost to melt, creatures like this long extinct rhino are being uncovered, giving researchers a glimpse into prehistoric times. Permafrost is a layer of soil that's been frozen for thousands of years, great for preserving ancient remains. The woolly rhino's carcass was found by a local farmer in Yakutia, Siberia, about 15,000 years after the species went extinct. The fossil was incredibly well preserved, with its fur, hooves, and internal organs still intact. But what made this discovery even more special was the rhino's horn, which is rarely found in such good condition because cartilage usually decomposes relatively quickly. In 2018, a local man named Pavel Efimov made an incredible discovery in Siberia: the severed head of a giant wolf, perfectly preserved beneath the permafrost. But this wolf was nearly 40,000 years old. It wasn't until 2019 that researchers started studying it in detail. The big question they were trying to answer was whether the wolf's head had been chopped off by humans or separated by ice. The cut on the wolf's neck wasn't what you'd expect from ice separation. It was rougher, less smooth, meaning it might have been made by something like a tool. The severed head is quite large, measuring about 40 centimeters, much bigger than the typical 25 centimeter head of a modern Siberian wolf. It had a thick mammoth-like coat, sharp fangs, and some parts of its skull seemed more developed than today's wolves. In 2016, ornithologist Stephen Emsley made a surprising find during a research trip in Antarctica. He stumbled on ancient penguin remains at Cape Urzar near the Ross Sea, and what he discovered there was unlike anything he'd seen before. Now, at first, Emsley was researching ancient penguin remains at the site, following a lead about penguin droppings. He didn't expect to find much, since explorers like Robert Falcon Scott and Ernest Shackleton hadn't recorded any penguin penguin sightings in the area, but when Emsley arrived, he found something unexpected: white splotchy guano stains and loose chick bones, which usually indicate that a penguin colony had recently occupied the site, but that wasn't the case. Investigating further, he found complete penguin chick carcasses and even intact mummies. The site must have been covered by snow and ice soon after the colony was last abandoned, preserving the surface remains for centuries, Emsley went on to write. The site had been used by penguins at different times in the past, with carbon dating showing it was occupied 3 times starting around 5,000 years ago. The site's location and the penguins' repeated visits were likely because of changing ice conditions, which would open and close the coast to the penguins. Emsley believes that this area could potentially see penguins returning in the future as climate change melts the sea ice earlier each summer, giving them access to the coast again. In 2018, some fossil ivory hunters in northeastern Siberia made a pretty cool discovery. While digging into the permafrost, they unearthed the carcass of a bird, but this bird was a 46,000-year-old specimen, perfectly frozen in time. The discovery was sent to paleontologist Love Dallin and a team of researchers at the Swedish Museum of Natural History. The bird is believed to be an ancestor of the horned lark, which is found in places like northern Russia and Mongolia today. It's a cool find though, the first bird of its kind ever to be discovered. The fact that the bird was almost completely intact made it one of the best preserved ancient animals ever found. The bird was found near Balaya Gora, a village in Yakutia, an area known as the Pole of Cold because of its extremely cold winters, sometimes reaching as low as -60 degrees Fahrenheit, which is roughly -50 degrees Celsius. That is just too cold. The researchers think that the end of the last ice age led to the formation of a new subspecies of animals like this bird. The discovery adds to a list of well-preserved creatures found in the same area, like a 42,000-year-old foal and an 18,000-year-old puppy, both of which I've talked about in previous videos. 2007 and 2008, 2 baby mammoths, later named Lyuba and Chroma, were found in Siberia. They were so well preserved that researchers were able to piece together how they died, even though both calves, one about 1 month old and the other 2 months old, died more than 40,000 years ago. Scientists used CT scans to find that the 2 mammoths probably choked on mud after falling into water. Daniel Fisher, a co-author of the study, stated the mud was like a really thick batter that they got clogged in their trachea and they were unable to dislodge by coughing. Basically preserved them from taking another breath. Lyuba and the 1-month-old calf was discovered by a reindeer herder. Chroma was found in 2008, frozen upright in permafrost. Scavengers had eaten parts of her heart, lungs, and skull. But both mummies still showed a neonatal line on their teeth, a marker of stress during birth, which helped scientists estimate their ages. CT scans of Lyuba showed signs of what's called a mammalian dive reflex, showing that she fell through the ice into a muddy lake where she tried to clear the mud from her airways but eventually suffocated. Chroma, who had a belly full of breast milk, also had mud in her trachea, but her death is a bit less cut and dry. But according to researchers, it's possible she fell into a river, broke her back, and was then buried in mud while trying to escape. In 2015, scientists in Siberia discovered a baby woolly rhino, perfectly preserved in a frozen riverbank. Nicknamed Sasha after the man who found it, the rhino calf is the most complete specimen of its kind ever discovered. Sasha lived around 10,000 years ago, was about 1.5 meters long, or almost 5 feet, and 0.8 meters high, about 2.6 feet, much smaller than the fully grown adults, which could reach up to 15 feet long. According to Albert Protopopov from the Yakutian Academy of Sciences, baby woolly rhinos are incredibly rare to find, so this was a pretty amazing discovery, especially because it helps researchers learn more about the early life of these animals, which they didn't really know much about before. Woolly rhinos went extinct around 10,000 years ago. Climate change and habitat loss likely led to their extinction, but some scientists also think overhunting may have been a part of it. Around 30,000 years ago in Siberia, a tiny cave lion cub was making its way across the tundra when a sudden mudslide or crack in the permafrost caused the cub to fall and get trapped. The cub was buried in ice, preserving her fur, skin, and organs in almost perfect condition. This poor cub, later named Sparta, was discovered by mammoth tusk hunters in 2017, poking out of the melting permafrost in Yakutia, Siberia. Sparta is probably the best preserved Ice Age animal ever found, said Lev Dallin, one of the study's co-authors, going on to say that even her whiskers were preserved. Sparta died about 28,000 years ago, and she was actually found alongside another cub named Boris, who was even older, dying around 43,000 years ago. Both cubs were about 1 to 2 months old when they died, with their sharp teeth just starting to emerge. Cave lions were closely related to modern African lions and lived across the northern hemisphere during the Ice Age. Unlike today's lions, though, these were, of course, adapted to freezing cold weather. In 2020, a perfectly preserved bear mummy was discovered in the Siberian permafrost. Siberia again. But anyway, it wasn't quite what scientists expected. At first, researchers thought they'd found the remains of a giant extinct cave bear, but eventually they realized the bear was much younger and from a completely different species. The bear was found by reindeer herders on a remote island in the East Siberian Sea. It was so well preserved that scientists could still see its skin, fur, claws, teeth, nose, internal organs, and even body fat. The remains were named the Etherican bear after a nearby river. At first, researchers at the Lazarev Mammoth Museum believed the bear was a cave bear, a massive species that went extinct about 22,000 years ago, but this bear was only about 3,460 years old. Turned out to be a young female brown bear standing just over 5 feet tall and weighing around 172 pounds. It was probably around 2 to 3 years old when it died. The bear's stomach contents revealed it had been eating plants and birds, with feathers still found inside its belly, which is incredible when you think about it. It also had signs of spinal injuries, which may have contributed to its death. In 2016, a gold miner in Yukon, Canada discovered something frozen in the ice. It turned out to be an ancient wolf pup, which had been almost perfectly preserved for 57,000 years. The mummified gray wolf, known as Zur, was found in the Klondike goldfields near Dawson City. Lead researcher Julie Machin, an anatomy professor, called it, quote, the most complete wolf specimen ever found from the Ice Age, going on to say all her soft tissue, her hair, her skin, even her little nose is still there. She's just complete, and that is really rare. Using radiocarbon dating and DNA analysis, scientists confirmed Zur died at just 7 weeks old. The remains were especially important because they were discovered in North America, unlike most finds in Siberia, as you've seen from this list, which are harder to access. Machen and her team were able to link Zur's DNA to both ancient Beringian wolves from Yukon and Russian gray wolves, which means that ancient wolves from North America and Eurasia mixed. Zur's remains also showed them what Ice Age wolves ate. The assumption had always been that they mostly ate bison or oxen, but as it turned out, this wolf mostly consumed aquatic animals, much like modern wolves in Alaska. In 2011, members of a tribe in northern Siberia found the remains of a steppe bison, perfectly preserved after being frozen for nearly 10,000 years. The bison was transported to the Yakutian Academy of Sciences, where scientists began to study it. Unlike other bison mummies discovered over the years, this one was almost entirely intact, with its internal organs in remarkable condition. Olga Potapova, collections curator at the Mammoth site of Hot Springs, explained that while bison mummies are not uncommon, they're usually incomplete, saying, quote, normally what you find with mummies of megafauna is partial carcasses, but this mummy was preserved so well that it earned a record for the level of its preservation. The bison, which was probably about 4 years old when it died, looked like it had starved to death. There was no fat around its abdomen, but its heart and digestive systems were pretty intact, even though some organs had shrunk over time. Researchers even managed to extract tissue samples from each organ, and for the first time ever, they found steppe bison brain tissue still preserved. In 2022, a nearly perfectly mummified baby woolly mammoth was discovered by a miner in the permafrost of Canada's Klondike goldfields. dating back around 30,000 years. The calf, thought to be around 1 month old when it died, was a female and measured just 4.5 feet long. Researchers described it as the most complete mummified mammoth found in North America. A lot of its skin and hair was still intact. As an Ice Age paleontologist, it had been one of my lifelong dreams to come face to face with a real woolly mammoth, said Grant Zazula, a paleontologist with the Yukon government, going on to describe the mammoth as, quote, one of the most incredible mummified Ice Age animals ever discovered in the world. The discovery happened when a mine worker hit something unexpected while digging. The team stopped all their work and brought in geologists who managed to recover the mammoth's remains, and just in time because a storm had been rolling in. Analysis suggested that the mammoth may have died after getting trapped in mud while grazing, with grass found in her stomach. In 2018, yet another incredible discovery was made in Siberia. The nearly perfectly preserved mummified remains of an Ice Age horse, believed to have died between 30,000 and 40,000 years ago. Its body was so well preserved that even tiny details like the hairs in its nostrils and around its hooves were still visible. The foal was found deep in a crater, about 328 feet or 100 meters deep, during an expedition in Yakutia. It was around 2 months old when it died. The mummified body was almost entirely intact, with no visible damage. Scientists collected samples from the foal's hair and tissue and found it belonged to an extinct species known as the Lena horse, which was genetically distinct from the wild horses that still roam the area today. This species lived in Siberia tens of thousands of years ago and disappeared long before modern horses evolved. In 2016, biologist Steve Emsley was in southern Antarctica when he came across something kind of confusing. It looked to be a recently abandoned Adelie penguin colony. There were mummified chicks, guano stains, pebbles from nests, but the thing is, Adelie penguins hadn't been spotted in the region for centuries. What Emsley soon discovered was that the penguin remains were far older than anyone could have imagined. Radiocarbon dating of the bones, eggshells, and mummified skin showed that these penguins had been dead for thousands of years. The rapidly melting ice in Antarctica revealed these ancient penguin remains. The penguins had likely settled in the area during warmer periods when the sea ice melted early, allowing the birds to reach the area and build their nests. The most recent colony, which had been buried during the Little Ice Age about 800 years ago, was finally uncovered as the region's ice began to recede. What you're looking at here is a tardigrade, aka a water bear. Now, is this a newly discovered alien species? Well, I wish, but no. These things actually exist right here at home. They're just really tiny, which I'm thankful for, because imagine if that alien-looking thing was the size of just even a regular house cat. That would just be horrifying. Tardigrades, nicknamed water bears, are one of the most resilient animals on the planet. They're microscopic animals that are known for their ability to survive in very extreme conditions all over the world. In places like Antarctica, they've been found frozen in ice for thousands of years. And what's amazing about these things is their ability to go into a kind of state of suspended animation. When conditions are harsh, like extreme cold or dryness, tardigrades dry out or freeze and enter a kind of hibernation. And when researchers thaw them out, they can come back to life. Water bears have even survived space travel in this dormant state. This makes them one of the toughest known organisms in the world.
Imagine being in the ocean and seeing a shark the size of a school bus. The megalodon was the largest shark to ever live, stretching up to 60 feet long with teeth the size of a human hand. Officially, it went extinct about 3.6 million years ago, but here is where things get creepy. In 2013, oceanographers found mysterious bite marks on a 30-foot whale carcass. The bites were so massive that no known shark alive could have made them. Some researchers suggested they could match Megalodon. Even stranger, in 1875, the HMS Challenger expedition dredged up 2 Megalodon teeth from the sea floor. When tested, they appeared to be less than 10,000 years old. That's a blink of an eye in geological terms. Add to that the countless reports from fishermen who claim to have seen enormous, dark shapes beneath their boats, and it makes scientists start to wonder, could the Megalodon still be cruising the deepest parts of the ocean? Imagine walking through a swamp and seeing a snake also longer than a school bus. Titanoboa was the largest snake ever known, stretching up to 42 feet and weighing more than a ton. It lived about 60 million years ago in what is now Colombia. Here's what unsettles scientists. In the Amazon today, anacondas grow over 20 feet long. Locals tell stories of giant snakes that drag entire cows into rivers. In 2016, construction workers in Brazil claimed to find a snake nearly 33 feet long. Photos circulated online, though their authenticity is debated. With the Amazon rainforest still largely unexplored, the possibility of a surviving Titanoboa relative is one that herpetologists don't completely rule out. And if one exists, it would be one of the most dangerous predators on Earth today. Imagine a fish so armored it looked more like a tank than an animal. Dunkleosteus lived 360 million years ago and could grow up to 30 feet long. Instead of teeth, it had sharp, bony plates that worked like giant shears, snapping prey in half with a bite force stronger than a crocodile. What creeps scientists out is how little we know about its extinction. Fossil records show it was everywhere in the ocean, then suddenly it vanished. With the deep sea still largely unexplored, researchers admit a small surviving relative could easily have gone unnoticed. If sharks like the goblin shark can stay hidden, why not something even stranger? Saber-toothed cats get all the fame, but there was another predator even stranger. Thylacosmolus looked like a saber-toothed tiger, but it wasn't even a cat. It was a marsupial predator from South America with giant fangs that curved out of its mouth like daggers. What unsettles scientists is how unique it was. Its teeth kept growing throughout its life, meaning it was constantly armed with deadly weapons. It went extinct only 3 million years ago, which is practically yesterday in prehistoric terms. With South America's remote forests and caves still underexplored, some researchers wonder if descendants of this bizarre predator might still exist. Imagine walking through the forest and hearing the grunt of a predator that looks like a cross between a pig and a wolf. These guys, nicknamed hell pig, was a massive pig-like creature that lived in North America about 30 million years ago. These definitely were not farm animals. Fossils show they were about 6 feet tall at the shoulder, with huge jaws strong enough to crush bone. They scavenged, hunted, and preyed on early horses. Their fossil range stretches from South Dakota to Texas. In the 19th century, pioneers even told stories of tusked beasts roaming the plains. While science places their extinction long ago, the vast wilderness of North America has always produced strange creature sightings. If any ancient mammal could have held on, it might just be the hell pig. What if bears used to be so massive they could outrun a horse? Arctidus simus, known as the short-faced bear, lived in North America until about 11,000 years ago. It stood 12 feet tall on its hind legs and weighed over a ton. Unlike modern bears, it had long legs built for speed, making it one of the fastest land predators of its time. Some cryptid reports from Alaska and Canada describe unusually tall, fast bears that don't quite match grizzlies. Scientists agree the short-faced bear survived late into the Ice Age, so rumors of its survival aren't as far-fetched as they might sound. What if the mammoth's cousin never really left the forest? Mastodons were elephant-like creatures that lived across North America until just 10,000 years ago. They looked similar to mammoths, but had straighter tusks and teeth built for chewing leaves. Here is the weird part. Indigenous oral traditions across North America describe giant forest elephants long after their supposed extinction. In the 19th century, pioneers in Ohio even reported seeing strange elephant tracks in the snow. Scientists admit mastodons survived late in some regions, and with vast Canadian wilderness still unexplored, the possibility isn't dismissed outright. Picture a Komodo dragon stretched to 20 feet long. That was Megalania, a giant lizard that lived in Australia until just 50,000 years ago, meaning that it overlapped with humans. It was venomous, like its modern Komodo cousins, and would have been able to take down animals as large as buffalo. Aboriginal rock art in Australia shows a giant reptilian creature that resembles these guys more than any other living species. Some rural sightings of massive lizards in the outback even today keep scientists questioning whether it might still have descendants hiding hiding in remote terrain. Imagine a creature twice the size of a gorilla standing nearly 10 feet tall. That was Gigantopithecus, a massive ape that roamed Asia up to 100,000 years ago. Here is the eerie part. Sightings of creatures like Bigfoot and the Yeti often match descriptions of the Gigantopithecus. In 2014, a team of anthropologists discovered strange hair samples that DNA tests could not easily classify. While some matched bears, others were inconclusive. Gigantopithecus likely went extinct due to climate change and hunting, but in the dense jungles of Southeast Asia and the Himalayas, some scientists admit the possibility of small populations surviving. If Bigfoot is real, it could very well be a living relic of this ancient giant. The scariest thing about extinction is how often it's wrong. In 2005, scientists discovered a rodent in Laos that was unlike anything alive. At first they thought it was new, but then they realized it was a Laotian rock rat, a species believed to have gone extinct 11 million years ago. This living fossil shocked scientists because it proved mammals, thought long dead, could survive in hidden environments. While not terrifying like a giant shark, its rediscovery suggests larger prehistoric animals might also still be hiding in remote corners of the world. If an animal this small can fool science for millions of years, what else might be out there?
Starting off this countdown, we have the sea jellies. Sea jellies, or jellyfish, have been around since over 500 million years ago. A reason being is that they are highly adaptable when it comes to change, whereas other animals might die off easily when put in more intense situations. Not only that, but jellyfish thrive in areas of water with depleted oxygen, otherwise known as dead zones, and they thrive in warmer temperatures. Their predators, on the other hand, like sea turtles, fish, and sharks, struggle in these environments, so they're just out there thriving and reproducing. In our ninth spot today, we have the vampire squid. Vampire squids are considered a living relic. They are said to have evolved from an ancestor of the octopus. In fact, their lineage goes all the way back 165 million years ago, and that's probably why this creature resembles both a squid and octopus, but are neither. It's confusing. This thing has 8 arms and 2 tentacles. Its arms are lined with spines that are arranged in 2 rows. What's also unique about this creature is its color, which can change depending on where they are in the ocean. They also have the largest eyes in the entire animal kingdom, which is wild because they are massive in comparison to the size of their body. But don't be fooled by its name, okay? It doesn't go around sucking blood out of other sea creatures like vampires. In fact, it gets its name from its dark color, and the skin that connects the arms kind of resemble a cape. In our 8th spot, we have the tadpole shrimp. These tiny little guys have been around for more than 200 million years, despite the fact that they are short-lived. They typically only live for about 2 to 4 weeks, but they thrive for so long because of the fact that their eggs only hatch when the environmental conditions are favorable. In fact, the eggs are resistant to their environment and have been known to remain dormant for 2 decades. It's pretty wild, right? Now these guys are called the tadpole shrimp because of their distinctive body shape. They are shaped like an oval with a long forked tail. The tail can extend up to 4 inches in length. Not only that, but some of these guys may have up to 70 pairs of limbs, and that's a lot. Coming in at number 7, we have the sturgeon. Sturgeon are ancient fish that used to swim around when dinosaurs roamed the earth. In fact, they are about 200 million years old. Fun fact is that these bad boys have a long lifespan. In fact, some of them live to be about 100 years old. Now, what's weird is that the sturgeon, unlike every other fish, don't have scales. Instead, their skin is rubbery and only have a few rows of bony scutes. Another fun fact is that they can grow up to be over 7 feet long and can weigh 300 pounds. Now, that is one big fish. Imagine swimming around in a lake and seeing this guy swim right by ya. No thank you. New fear unlocked. Sadly, their population is dwindling, but there are a number of cities out there determined to protect their habitat. In our sixth spot, we have the horseshoe shrimp. Now this is considered a living fossil, and that's because it has hardly changed over the years. I mean, they've been around for 200 million years, and they still basically look the same. Now, they get their name because their body curves a bit like a horseshoe, but they're tiny. They're about 1.5 inches in length. Some species can grow bigger, others grow smaller. Now, these guys have no eyes, which baffles scientists because they would think that after all these years, they would evolve to have eyes. But nope, not at all. What else is interesting is that they are hermaphroditic, meaning they have both male and female reproductive organs. You learn something new every day. We're now at our fifth and halfway mark with SpongeBob SquarePants. And by SpongeBob, I mean a sponge. Now what's interesting is that no one knows for sure how old the sponge is, but a rough estimate would be that they are at least 760 million years old, which then makes them the longest existing marine life species still around. Another fun fact is that a single sponge can live to be around 200 years old, meaning SpongeBob will surpass all his friends in age. That's a little sad, like he'll be alone while he watches all his friends die around him. Anyways, sponges also often use chemicals to deter predators from eating them. Scientists have discovered that some of these chemicals may have potential to treat cancer and HIV, which is incredible. In our fourth spot today, we have the hagfish. Now, I personally hate these things, okay? They creep me the hell out. They literally look like human intestines. But what's even more gross are their feeding habits. So basically, they consume other sea creatures by burrowing their way into them. They literally create a massive tunnel into the creatures and then eat them from the inside out. Okay, how is that not creepy? Not only that, but it secretes this slime to ward off predators. The slime is so sticky that it can clog the gills of the attackers. Okay, they're so creepy, and they've been around for 300 million years. In our third spot today, we have the walruses. Aren't these guys so silly and goofy looking? From fossil records, it's believed that walruses date back anywhere from 600,000 years to 14 million years ago. But the ones dating back millions of years ago were not quite like the modern walruses. They don't have the elongated upper canines, but you know, evolution is a thing. However, walruses are currently at risk. Due to climate change, they are losing stable sea ice to chill on, making it harder for them to hunt for food and such, and it's really sad. In our second spot, we have mud skippers. Now, these are pretty interesting creatures that have been around for over 350 million years, according to fossil records. They have the body of a tadpole, but a face of a frog or something. I don't know. So these things can reach around 2.75 to 9.7 inches in length. They are usually an olive brown color, however, some species are covered with blue markings. They also have protruding eyes, 2 pectoral fins, and 2 dorsal fins. The freakiest thing about them is that they can move their eyes around independently from each other, as in one eye can be looking up while the other is looking down. It's kinda cool, but it's also kinda weird. Like, imagine if humans could do that. That would be wild. And in our number one spot today, we have the whale shark. Although these guys look intimidating, they aren't. In fact, they are often referred to as gentle giants. They are huge, but not really aggressive. They can grow to be up to 12 meters long. In fact, they are declared the world's largest fish. A reason why they get the reputation of being gentle giants is because they are filter feeders. They can neither bite nor chew, but they can process more than 6,000 liters of water an hour through their gills. Now, its mouth can stretch to 4 feet wide, but their teeth are so tiny that they can only eat small shrimp, fish, and plankton by using their gill rakers as a suction filter. Not only that, but less than 10% of whale sharks born survive adulthood, which is sad. But those that do can live to be 150 years of age, which is surprising since they have been around anywhere from 245 to 65 million years ago.